Axios Barak Ravid, Dave Lawler, June 2, 2021. Israeli Change Coalition announces new government to oust Netanyahu. Photo, Uriel Sinai Getty Images. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid has notified President Reuven Rivlin that he managed to form a power, sharing government that will oust Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if it survives a confidence vote in the Knesset. Why it matters, we are Axios Barak Ravid, Dave Lawler, June 2, 2021. Israeli Change Coalition announces new government to oust Netanyahu. Photo, Uriel Sinai Getty Images. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid has notified President Reuven Rivlin that he managed to form a power, sharing government that will oust Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if it survives a confidence vote in the Knesset. Why it matters, we are on the verge of a seismic event in Israeli politics, with Israel's longest serving prime minister and the man who has dominated the country's politics and relations with the world for over a decade on the verge of being replaced. But he's not out quite yet. Driving the news, right-winger Naftali Bennett would serve first as prime minister for 2 years, with the centrist Lapid then rotating into the job. The announcement was made possible by the unprecedented decision of the Islamist Ram Party, which would be the first Arab party to enter an Israeli government, to unite with Bennett and Lapid. With Ram as well as the right-wing New Hope Party, which also signed a coalition agreement, Lapid and Bennett currently have 61 members of the Knesset, the exact number needed for a majority. Yes, but some of the coalition agreements are not yet final. They'll have to be presented to the Knesset before a vote is held on the government within 12 days. In the interim, Netanyahu is expected to try to sabotage the new coalition and press several of its right-wing members to defect. The latest, Lapid sent a letter to Knesset Speaker Yariv Levin, a Netanyahu crony, asking him to convene the Knesset as soon as possible in order to vote on the new government. Levin can stall the vote for at least a week. Under pressure from Netanyahu and his supporters, one member of Bennett's party announced 3 weeks ago that he would vote against the government. In recent hours, another member of Bennett's party also said he was considering following suit, which would force Lapid and Bennett to get at least one member of the Arab Joint List to vote in favor of the government or abstain. Between the lines, Bennett, a tech entrepreneur and former Netanyahu protege, would become prime minister despite only winning 7 seats in the election. He was able to play the kingmaker role in the scramble to form a government, with both Netanyahu and Lapid needing his support. While he is a conservative, particularly on Israel-Palestine issues, he will be constrained by the broad range of parties in the coalition, and the fact that Lapid will have a veto on his policies. What to watch: the last-minute snags in the negotiations over the past few days sent a clear signal of how fragile the government will be if it's formed and how much pressure Netanyahu and his supporters will be able to exert on its right-wing members. Netanyahu, who is currently on trial for corruption, would be expected to become opposition leader. More from Axios study, stimulus checks helped keep Americans afloat. 4 hours ago, Axios Ali Bank nixes overdraft fees entirely. 1 hour ago, Axios FBI rush-linked. Are evil? Orion Rumler, June 2, 2021. Axios Orion Rumler, June 2, 2021. Study, stimulus checks helped keep Americans afloat. Illustration, Aida Amer. Axios. Stimulus checks carved out by 2 major U.S. COVID relief bills, one signed by then-President Trump last December, and one by President Biden in March, helped many Americans avoid disaster, a new University of Michigan study analyzing census data finds. Why it matters: more Americans were able to afford food and pay for standard household expenses after stimulus checks were distributed by the IRS in January and April, the analysis found. Yes, but Scott Winship, director of poverty studies at the American Enterprise Institute, questioned how reliable the census data is, per the New York Times. He noted that fewer than 1 in 10 of the households the government contacts answer the biweekly surveys. He also argued that hardship would have fallen anyway, since the last round of stimulus checks coincided with tax season, which sends large sums to low-wage workers through tax credits. Per the Times, Zachary Parleen, a researcher at Columbia University, said that about half the country's decline in poverty would have taken place without pandemic relief, primarily because of earned income and child tax credits. What they found, adults with children and people in households with annual incomes less than $25,000 benefited most from direct coronavirus relief in the two bills, the study found. Respondents to the Census Household Pulse survey reported less anxiety and depression after the bills were passed. What to watch? The expanded monthly child tax credit introduced in Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package will begin arriving in parents' bank accounts on July 15, according to the White House. More from Axios. Axios, Ally Bank nixes overdraft fees entirely. 1 hour ago, Axios FBI rush-linked. Are evil behind ransomware attack on meatpacker JBS. 1 hour ago, Axios. Federal Reserve to begin winding down emergency pandemic care bond purchases. 1 hour ago, related stories Vanity Fair. Trump has reportedly been telling people he's going to be president again by August, which would suggest he's planning. The Federal Reserve said Wednesday it will begin selling the corporate bonds, and Axios, Kate Marino, June 2, 2021. Federal Reserve to begin winding down emergency pandemic care bond purchases. Stephanie Reynolds, Getty Images. The Federal Reserve said Wednesday it will begin selling the corporate bonds and ETFs it purchased last year to shore up market liquidity. Why it matters: the enormity of the Fed's emergency response after the onset of the pandemic was without precedent. The liquidity it injected into the market supported asset prices and encouraged lending, and probably helped avert a drawn-out recession. But critics say the Fed's support has gone on too long, and is now contributing to asset bubbles. What's new? The Fed said Wednesday afternoon it will wind down a portfolio dubbed the Secondary Market Corporate Credit Facility (SMCCF), which held $13.0 billion in bonds and ETFs as of last week. Context: the SMCCF is small compared to an almost $8 trillion Fed balance sheet, and shows some urgency by the Fed board to wind down emergency facilities if possible, Bloomberg reports. What they're saying: SMCCF portfolio sales will be gradual and orderly, and will aim to minimize the potential for any adverse impact on market functioning, the Fed says. A Federal Reserve spokesperson told Bloomberg the portfolio wind down is not a signal about monetary policy. More from Axios. NFL pledges to halt practice that assumed black players started with lower cognitive function 2 hours ago. Axios climate activists gained third seat on ExxonMobil's board. 2 hours ago, Axios LinkedIn to start paying ERG leaders $10,000 a year. 3 hours ago, related stories, Bloomberg, A50. Your bond from Sweden is about to test inflation anxiety. 11 hours ago, BuzzFeed. If you recognize any of these 50 pictures, I'm sorry, you're officially old. 3 hours ago. Reuters, Fed says it will start unwinding its corporate bond holdings 2 hours ago. Microsoft is set to share details June 24 on the biggest update to its Windows operating system in years, reports Axios chief tech correspondent Ina Fried. Why it matters: both Chromebook and Apple's Macintosh have gained ground in recent years, as Microsoft has made only modest updates to Windows 10. This one would appear to be in the latter category, with changes expected not only to the way Windows looks and works, but also to the underlying business model. Axios, Orion Rumler, June 2, 2021. Report: California wildfire destroyed 10% of world's giant sequoias. 50 to 70-year-old conifers turned into black sticks near McIntyre Grove. October 2020 in Springville, CA. Photo: LC Los Angeles Times. A single wildfire that burned through the southern Sierra Nevada last year destroyed anywhere from 10% to 14% of Earth's mature redwood trees, according to a draft report from National Park Service. Scientists obtained by the Visalia Times Delta. The big picture: some of the biggest wildfires in modern California history took place last year. California's 2021 wildfire season is already looking grim, as extreme drought grips much of the state and temperatures rise. What they're saying: I cannot overemphasize how mind-blowing this is for all of us. These trees have lived for thousands of years. They've survived dozens of wildfires already. Christy Brigham, Chief of Resources Management and Science at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, told the Times Delta. Of note, Brigham emphasized the research from the study still has to be peer-reviewed, and the numbers are preliminary. More from Axios. Mueller to help teach university course on Mueller investigation. 4 hours ago. Axios hacked Mueller to help teach university course on Mueller investigation. Axios, Oriana Gonzalez, June 2, 2021. Mueller to help teach university course on Mueller investigation. Photo: Alex Wong, Getty Images. The University of Virginia announced on Wednesday that it will start offering a new course on the Mueller investigation, and students will hear from Robert Mueller himself. Details: starting this fall, students at the UVA School of Law will be able to take the course, titled The Mueller Report and the Role of the Special Counsel, which will offer an inside look at the almost 2-year investigation into former President Trump's dealings with Russia and Russia's possible interference in the 2016 election. The Wall Street Journal: technology ransomware scourge continues as essential services are hit. Attacks on infrastructure are part of a global criminal pivot, from stealing data to hobbling operations. New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority revealed that it had been hacked in April. Credit: NIYI Folk The News 2/Summa Press. By Robert McMillan, Joseph de Avila and Jacob Bunge. June 2, 2021, 6:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Cyberattacks on critical infrastructure, including transportation systems in New York and Massachusetts, demonstrated the intensifying threat that hackers pose to U.S. business and providers of essential services. An attack this week on JBS SA, the world's biggest meat company by sales, temporarily upended U.S. food supplies after it caused JBS's plants to temporarily shut down. White House officials said the hacking was likely carried out by a group based in Russia. JBS said it restarted most of its plants on Wednesday. On Wednesday, a ransomware attack disrupted ferry services in Massachusetts. New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority also revealed Wednesday that it had been hacked in April, although the attack didn't disrupt operations, including the city's subway system. In May, the operator of an essential pipeline bringing gasoline to parts of the East Coast paid about $4.4 million to regain control of its operations and restore service. San Diego-based Scripps Health said Tuesday that it is still recovering from a cyber attack it discovered on May 1 that disrupted its patient portal, electronic medical records, radiology and other systems, and canceled or delayed appointments at its hospitals and clinics. To get the result at once, the SEC could double down on the policy by going back to federal court and asking a judge to hold Mr. Musk in contempt for violating it. The regulator also could try to unwind the whole deal and resume its fraud lawsuit against Mr. Musk, with the potential to have him barred from public markets. Neither Chinese social media sites like Weibo soon filled with attacks on Mr. Sina for describing Taiwan as a country. Opinion. Commentary: USA wrestler kowtows, a musician stands up. John Cena grovels to China as Sean Lennon tweets up a politically incorrect storm. Wrestler and actor John Cena, in Miami, January 31, 2020. Credit: Scott Ruff, Associated Press. By Michael Taub. June 2, 2021, 5:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Professional wrestling isn't known to be especially woke, but commercial pressure got to wrestler and actor John Cena. In a May 25 interview conducted in Mandarin, Mr. Cena told the Taiwanese news station TVBS that Taiwan is the first country that can watch F9, the latest Fast and Furious sequel, in which Mr. Cena has a supporting role. Opens in the US later this month. Chinese social media sites like Weibo soon filled with attacks on Mr. Cena for describing Taiwan as a country. Beijing's official line is that it's a renegade province. Mr. Cena took to Weibo to deliver a groveling apology. I made a mistake, I must say right now. It's so important. I love and respect Chinese people, the former 15-time World Wrestling Entertainment Champion pleaded. What can your heart rate tell you? The Wall Street Journal, Health and Wellness. What can your heart rate tell you? Fitness trackers are often mainly used to count steps, but your heart rate metrics can also be revealing. Doctors say the heart rate measure on your fitness tracker can be a helpful tool. Credit Michelle Tantesi, Reuters. By Betsy Morris. May 24, 2021, 1:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What can you learn from the heart rate metrics on your fitness tracker? The bottom line. You may use your fitness tracker mostly to count steps, but don't ignore your heart rate metrics. They can tell you a lot about your health. Devices now deliver a variety of heart rate measurements, including resting rate, walking rate, and variability, the variation of time between beats. SIM can be programmed to notify you of a possible problem, such as a heart rate that is unusually high, low, or regular. Without getting fancy, however, your basic heart rate alone can be revealing. The details. The heart rate is usually measured as the number of beats per minute (BPM). In adults, a healthy resting heart rate can range from 60 to 100 BPM. It is highly variable. There's no so-called normal, says Dr. Michael Snyder, professor of genetics at Stanford University School of Medicine. For athletes and the very fit, it can be as low as 40 BPM, according to the American Heart Association. Heart rates generally increase while one is walking, running, or conducting a Zoom meeting. Alcohol and altitude increase the heart rate, as does stress. The ability to monitor heart rates continuously, rather than once or twice a year in a doctor's office, is relatively new, and physicians warn that the devices aren't always accurate. The makers often don't disclose the algorithms they've used or how they've tested the data the devices deliver, cardiologists and researchers say. However, some doctors say it may be worth noting if there is a significant difference in your on-vacation heart rate and your at-work heart rate. From an evolutionary standpoint, there's definitely a correlation between how long you live and a lower heart rate, says Dr. Yas Moedi, a cardiologist and clinical associate at the University Health Network in Toronto, Canada. Being in a stressful environment for a prolonged time certainly can have consequences, she says. Even if not precise, directional heart rate patterns can be revealing. Dr. Moedi experienced that firsthand when her own heart rate went up to 120 BPM on a day she was to give a speech. It wasn't the unusually high rate that worried her most, it was the consistency of the high reading. Normally, heart rate fluctuates throughout the day, influenced by the physical, mental, and behavioral changes that follow a 24-hour cycle. She was pregnant and it turned out she'd become so severely iron deficient that she needed an infusion. My heart was compensating by beating really fast so it could meet my body's demands, she says. How to reconnect with friends in person as the pandemic recedes. The Wall Street Journal bonds, how to reconnect with friends in person as the pandemic recedes. Reviving friendships may be more complicated than we expect. Here are some strategies. Credit Getty Images. By Elizabeth Bernstein. May 29, 2021, 11:59 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Ready to see your friends again? The process may be more complicated than you think. Many of us haven't seen even our closest friends for more than a year. We've got a lot of catching up to do, and it can be overwhelming to think about where to start. While we're excited about these reunions, it helps to manage our expectations. Some friends may have had a harder year than we knew and may need support just as we're ready to move on from the pandemic. We need to brace ourselves for conversations that may take significant mental energy at a time when our emotional bandwidth is already running low, and we should be ready to address hurt feelings. Where were you on either side? We've all been through so much. We're all so raw, and there is a strong sense of longing, says Marissa King, a sociologist and professor of organizational behavior at the Yale School of Management, who studies social networks. This combination makes for a really emotional reconnection. Research conducted during the pandemic by Dr. King and colleagues published in January in the journal Sources found that people's inner circles, those they consider their nearest and dearest, shifted during the pandemic. They included more family members and fewer close friends. 20% fewer close friends to be exact. Reconnecting will be worth the effort. Research shows that people with solid friendships live healthier, longer lives. Friendship decreases blood pressure and stress, reduces the risk of depression, and increases longevity, in large part because someone is watching out for us. According to one recent study, we're even happier hanging out with friends than we are with our romantic partners or children. We'll need some thoughtful strategies to help us reconnect. I spoke to Dr. King, as well as a social psychologist who studies friendship, and a linguist who specializes in interpersonal communication to get advice. Pick your A team. You only have so much time and energy. We have the capacity to maintain 15 core friendships, with just 5 of them being the most intimate, shoulder-to-cry-on types of friends, according to research by Oxford University evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, detailed in his book Friends, Understanding the Power of Our Most Important Relationships. The pandemic presents an opportunity to reconfigure this inner circle, but it's going to take a concerted effort to get together, says Deborah Tannen, a professor of linguistics at Georgetown, and author of 11 books on communication, including You're the Only One I Can Tell. Inside the Language of Women's Friendships, she suggests you make a list of your friends. Identify who you missed the most and who you didn't miss much at all. The list will help you prioritize. Which friends should you reach out to first and try to see most often? It will also change the way you respond when people reach out to you. Once you've made your list, you're more likely to answer the phone when one of your A-teamers calls, rather than waiting to call back when you may feel more like talking. Pace yourself. In-person interactions are going to require a level of intensity and concentration we haven't experienced in a while. We're out of practice. The pandemic has taught us a lot, the hard way, about how much connection we need. Extroverts are energized externally, they love being around other people. Introverts become energized internally, they prefer to spend time alone. Ambiverts are a mix of both. It doesn't matter which you are, most people are eager to reconnect with their friends. But know your limits, and honor them. Start slow. Dr. Tannen suggests you may want to see one friend a week right now, even if you were someone who liked to see friends every night pre-pandemic. Then gradually build up to a pace you're comfortable with. Introverts may want to stay slow forever. Consider making plans with a friend to do an activity, visit a museum, take a bike ride, rather than getting together to talk. It may be less emotionally draining. Dr. Tannen says men typically prefer doing activities with friends, rather than just talking anyway. And make a plan for your second date soon. Reconnection. Expect tough emotions. You may be eager to see your friend, down a few cocktails, share the $10 billion bright spot in the battered world of office real estate. Bloomberg photographer, Dheeraj Singh Bloomberg, the $10 billion bright spot in the battered world of office real estate. Blackstone, KKR, and other investors are betting on laboratory space as vaccines fuel the economic rebound. By John Gittleson, June 2, 2021. 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Updated at June 2, 2021. 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Even as the remote work era clouds the future for offices, one segment of the business is drawing cash from investors including Blackstone, Group Incorporated, and KKR and Company. More than $10 billion has gone toward buying buildings used for life sciences and other research this year, according to Real Capital Analytics Incorporated. That accounted for approximately 4% of all global commercial real estate transactions through May, double the share from last year. That estimate doesn't count new construction, and fresh buildings are breaking ground in U.S. cities including Boston, San Diego, and San Francisco many, without having signed major tenants. Unlike workers in conventional offices, many scientists don't work remotely, and as vaccines help fuel the economic rebound, funding for medical innovations is expected to drive the need for more space, particularly in the US and UK. The pandemic only amplified the demand growth, but it's a trend we think will continue for years, Nadeem Megji, Blackstone's head of Real Estate Americas, said in an interview. This is about, broadly, advances in drug discovery, advances in biology, and a greater need given an aging population. Last year, as social distancing emptied out office buildings and damped investor interest in malls and hotels, life science building sales and refinancing totaled about $25 billion, up from roughly $9 billion in 2019, according to Eastdil Secured. Blackstone, a veteran investor in the sector, booked a $6.5 billion profit from refinancing Biomed Realty Trust, the largest private owner of life science office buildings in the U.S. had also agreed in December to buy a portfolio of lab buildings for $3. First comes the pandemic divorce, then the tits out summer. Vanity Fair, post-pandemic summer. First comes the pandemic divorce, then the tits out summer, for people whose marriages ended during the pandemic. Warm weather and vaccines promise a really new beginning, by Sulana Misra. May 28, 2021. By H. Armstrong Roberts. Classic Stock, Getty Images. When people ask her if the pandemic caused her divorce, Kristen gets frustrated. I would never ask someone if it was the pandemic. If someone tells you their story is their story. The pandemic didn't cause my ex to pick up the golf club. Right? She said over the phone as she walked her dog. Did the pandemic help? No. But it also helped me get out quicker. She's one of several people who got divorced during the pandemic who have repeated the same thing. The pandemic merely made the fractures in their relationships known. As Christina, a Canadian divorcee living in London, told me, I had this whole system of so many fun distractions that I couldn't even notice my relationship was actually horrible for me. And then when all those distractions were gone, it was like, oh wait, the thing that you're supposed to lean on when nothing else is happening is actually just draining you completely. Names marked with an asterisk have been changed. With the promise of a hot vax summer upon us, divorcees are finding themselves ready to let out much more than 15 months of pent-up emotion and desire. I want all the serotonins, Christina said when asked about her plans for the summer. My motto for 2021 is tits out. Like anyone. The unspoken wedge between parents and grandparents. The Atlantic family, the unspoken wedge between parents and grandparents. Each generation has its own norms for parenting. Arguing over the differences can be an emotional minefield. Robin Marantz Hennig, April 30, 2021. Martin Parr Magnum Photos. Martin Parr Magnum Photos. One of the sweetest parts of being a grandparent is being invited by your own adult children to spend time with your grandkids. But the invitation comes with a few conditions. And in even the most loving families, grandparents ignore these rules on a regular basis. For many reasons, they can't help overstepping the boundaries, whether because of a preclearness at their own kids telling them what to do, a sincere belief that they know more about raising children than their kids do, or, more poignantly, a resistance to the harsh reality that they've aged out of the cherished role of family decision-maker. The result can be fraught encounters that can make or break a relationship. It increasingly feels like my parents are spending a lot of time trying to instill Christianity into our son, says a 34-year-old editor who lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 young boys. Neither she nor her husband is religious, yet their older son, age 3, often comes back from time spent with his grandparents singing church songs and saying things like God made us, and God watches us, she told me. At first, this mother, who requested anonymity to avoid offending her parents and her husband, were sort of alarmed about it, she said. But now they're just a bit flummoxed and, on a good day, amused. I think we both have a sense of humor about how funny it is for 2 agnostic parents to have a kid running around singing Jesus Loves Me, she said. Yet even if she wanted to raise the issue with her parents, she said she's not quite sure how she would. My mom gets quite defensive about anything with the kids, she said, even when I've tried to bring things up with her as carefully as possible. Not at an emotional moment. There's a lot of fallout. She said this fallout comes from any disputed choice at all, such as grandma bribing her grandson with sweets to get him to eat another carrot. I rarely bring these things up with her, because the risk-benefit ratio is not there, she said. Her parents moved halfway across the country so they could be close to the editor's 2 children or only grandchildren, and they have a loving relationship with the boys. We are so intertwined in each other's lives, we see them several times a week, the editor said. Having a difficult conversation that leads to a few days of discomfort and cold shoulder treatment. That's tough. and not something I want to get into unless really, really important. Conflicts between parents and grandparents over what is best for a grandchild can be as varied as fights about junk food or disagreements about spanking. How many grandparents refuse to put infants to sleep on their back, as parents ask them to, because in their day babies were put down on their belly. How many insist on allowing their grandchildren another cookie or half-hour of television, even when they know the parents have rules about sugar. Political differences with her in-laws had already led to a rather distressing relationship even before the baby was born, Shannon said. We've had arguments about climate change, about vaccines, but we've been able to overcome those arguments somewhat, she said, adding that she thought things would improve once they could all bond over a new baby. But with the grandparents' refusal to follow the parents' rules, any hopes of improvement evaporated. And in Shannon's view, everyone's life is worse off. She said she is heartbroken for her daughter, who could know what it's like to be loved by all four of her grandparents. And it's not because of COVID, it's because of politics, and she's sad for her in-laws. They're missing this entire stage. It's their only grandchild and they don't know her. They had been asking for a grandchild for years, she said, but they have more or less shut themselves out of her life. Now a FaceTime relationship is all they have. Limiting access to grandchildren is an extreme response, but it's not that rare. The Mott poll found that when parents got up the resolve to talk with grandparents about whatever was bothering them, the grandparents who were intransigent sometimes ended up facing consequences. When grandparents said they would do better but didn't really change their behavior, 32% of parents followed up by limiting their time with the grandchildren. When grandparents said outright that they wouldn't follow the parents' rules, 42% of them ended up with restricted access to the grandchildren. Still, the majority of parents in the Mott poll took the path that my correspondents took, the path I took too, when I chafed at some of the things my own mother did that felt like a harsh judgment of my mothering skills. They didn't say anything, and they didn't limit the time the grandparents spent with the grandchildren. It's been so precious to watch their bond with my children grow since they moved here, the Brooklyn mother said. In that context, the Jesus issue is just one thing that causes some head scratching, and leads us to think harder about our own point of view and the way we're raising our kids. And some parents steer clear of conflict for several reasons. There are the complicated ones, which involve reckoning with new roles of authority and the family and sensitivities around dishing out parenting advice. Then there's the simple one, the recognition that the grandparent-grandchild relationship, even if it comes with some tension, is ultimately a gift. Complex, the best albums of 2021. So far, by Jessica McKinney, Andre G., Eric Skelton, Wes Aramesh, Trey Alston, Alejandro D. Jesus, June 2, 2021, Complex Original. Let's be honest, it's been an unusual year in music so far. At the midway point of 2021, many of the heavyweights in rap and pop are still holding on to their albums, waiting for the full-blown return of live concerts and festivals. In their absence, up-and-comers like Pusha T and Olivia Rodrigo have stepped up and taken advantage of the lull to make noise of their own, previewing what music might sound like in years to come. If you missed the A-listers though, you're in luck. All signs point to the second half of the year bringing the kind of blockbuster albums that have largely evaded us so far. J. Cole's The Off-Season may have just broken the seal, and now we await rumored releases from the likes of Drake and Kendrick, and even a joint project from Lil Baby and Lil Durk. Slow Die, Tyron. What can you do after being involved in controversy? You can fight and fuss about it, you can apologize, or you can make an album that's at least partially inspired by it. A year to the day after Slow Die was kicked out of the Emmy Awards, he chose the final option, and it worked. Childhood, adulthood, and regret are among the themes of the project, which encompasses two drastically different halves. The first, characterized by songs with all caps titles, is aggressive, and the second, featuring songs with lowercase names, is more tranquil. In doing so, he creates a complete self-portrait of someone reckoning with the fire and ice of their soul, seeking out another chance inspired by the mistakes that they've grown from. Trey Alston. The night before the offseason arrived, No Features was trending on Twitter. J. Cole had just shared a guest-free tracklist, and fans were already digging up old Photoshop files in preparation for another round of platinum with No Features memes. It was all a fake out though. As we soon found out, he was actually just setting us up for a stacked roster full of surprise guests, including 21 Savage, Lil Baby, Morey, Black, and Boss. Because for Cole, the offseason is all about freeing himself of expectations. You thought he would rap over his own beats again. Nah, this time he teamed up with everyone from Boynigat, if one dot to Timbaland to T-. You expected another high-level concept album? Nah, he's in mixtape mode, proving he can rap his ass off about anything in various styles. You were waiting for him to fall off? Absolutely not. At 36 years old, he pulled off one of the best albums of his career so far. Howard University is reportedly planning to launch a masterclass, inspired by the late Chadwick Boseman, who graduated from the school in 2000. Per TMZ, the school's president Wayne Frederick said work has begun on plans to roll out a masterclass at the recently reestablished and renamed Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts. Prior to his death in 2020, the acclaimed actor approached the school with an idea for a program that would help students grasp an understanding of the entertainment industry. He was ready to be hands-on with the project, and had even signed paperwork to confirm his involvement. Students at the Fine Arts College will be getting a new curriculum later down the line, with a number of industry experts working directly with them. While the university has always had guest lectures, the new Boseman-inspired masterclass will incorporate these speakers into the education and coursework. Dean Felicia Rashad, a mentor of Boseman's and the new head of the Fine Arts College, will be in charge of the masterclass. The news comes just a week after Howard University announced plans to name its newly re-established College of Fine Arts in honor of Boseman. Chad fought to preserve the College of Fine Arts during his matriculation at Howard and remained dedicated to the fight throughout his career, and he would be overjoyed by this development. Boseman's family said in a statement, "His time at Howard University helped shape both the man and the artist that he became, committed to truth, integrity,